Hey Cameron, how are you? It's Wednesday. It's time for our Bible study. Today we're going to pick up where we left off last week we read the 6th chapter of Genesis, kind of the beginning of the story of Noah. And this week we're going to go into chapter 7 and deal with Noah as he has already built the ark. And we're going to begin here. Then the Lord said to Noah, "Enter the ark, you and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this time. And you shall take with you of every clean animal by sevens, a male and his female, and of the animals that are not clean, 2, a male and his female. Also of the birds of the sky by sevens, male and female, to keep offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For after 7 more days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made." And Noah did according to all the Lord commanded him. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Then Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him entered the ark because of the water of the flood. Of clean animals and animals that are not clean, and birds and everything that creeps on the ground. There went into the ark to Noah by twos, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came about after the 7 days that the water of the flood came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened. And rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth and the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of the sons of them entered the ark, they and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, all sorts of birds. So they went into the ark to Noah by twos of all the flesh in which was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, entered as God had commanded him. And the Lord closed it behind him. Then the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. And the water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark floated to the surface of the water, and the water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere were under the heavens were covered. The water prevailed 15 cubits higher, and the mountains were covered. And the flesh that moved on the earth perished, birds and cattle and beasts and every swarming thing that swarms upon the earth, and all mankind. Of all that was on the dry land, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life died. And thus he blotted out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to the birds of the sky. And they were blotted out from the earth, and only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. And the water prevailed upon the earth 150 days. This is chapter 7, and it's not terribly long. It's only 24 verses. But I think it's important that we take a moment, perhaps today's lesson, and just look at chapter 7. It is the account, of course, in greater detail of what took place in this flood and what happened. And details like this lend, I think, very much to the veracity of these stories. The details that are included, I think, are something that we should consider, as we looking at this. They built the ark, and it said, the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this time. It's a very interesting idea. It said that God saw Noah as righteous. But because of Noah's righteousness, he brings Noah's wife and his 3 sons and his daughters-in-law. Now, that's a wonderful idea. Because, if he's going to save Noah, and he needs Noah, well, first they need to repopulate the earth, of course, but if he's going to extend Noah this grace, he has to allow Noah to keep those that he loves so dearly. He has to be able to keep his immediate family. Noah is 600 years old when the rains start. And they go into some detail about that, which we'll get to in a minute. He basically, I think, saves Mrs. Noah and Shem and Mrs. Shem and Ham and Mrs. Ham and Japheth and Mrs. Japheth. The 7 of them all get saved because Noah was righteous. And I think that's encouraging. That's encouraging. I think that goes to what we talked to in Ephesians, that the faith of the believer may sometimes actually cover and shield those in proximity. I think of when I was at college, I know that my mother prayed for me. And many people who cared about me were praying for me, but my mother in particular, I'm sure, prayed for me every day. And as we are reminded by St. Peter, the prayers of the righteous avail much. And I often I think, I look back on some of the crazy antics we got into in ROTC or in my fraternity or whatever we were doing, and I think, oh my goodness, how did we survive that? Or how did we avoid jail? And I kind of think, well, my mother saying those prayers for me probably availed much and kept me out of dire consequences. Here's the Lord's commandment: you shall take with you of every clean animal. And this is such an interesting idea, clean animal. When the codes for which animals were clean and unclean aren't given until Exodus. And so, this is a little bit of an anachronism here as to how did Noah know what was clean and unclean? What was going on there? And of course, there are some heavy literary critics that want to make the argument then that this anachronism is one of the reasons to find fault in a literalist interpretation. That a literalist interpretation cannot account for this legal anachronism. How were the animals counted clean or unclean at this point when the codes for kosher basically were not given until much later? So that's a question. That's a question. We don't have a textual resolution for that. Whether there were pre-existing dietary codes that Noah kind of adhered to culturally, but as far as God giving those codes, as for cleanliness and uncleanliness for these animals as to which could be eaten and which could not, we don't have that information. So you shall take with you of every clean animal by 7s, a male and his female, and of the animals that are not clean, 2, a male and his female. Also of the birds of the sky by sevens, male and female, to keep an offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For after 7 more days I will send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made. And Noah did according to all that the Lord had commanded him. It's a lot of animals. If the clean animals had to be, well, 7 pairs. So that's 14 animals, right? Now you've got to keep one pair, but the other 6, why? For food, possibly. Although the idea of butchering animals in the ark seems tough. Seemed like a tough thing to do. But maybe the intention was that they would have an easier time multiplying once the flood was over. You'd want more of these clean animals that were good for livestock than you would the unclean animals. For after 7 more days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made. Noah did according to all that God had commanded, that the Lord commanded him. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Now it's interesting to note, they give Noah's age, 600 years old when the water came on the earth. They do not tell us how old Noah was in chapter 6 when the Lord told him to build the ark. We don't know. We don't know here how long it took him to build that ark. You know, that's a lot of wood. That's a big boat. Presumably his sons and the ladies would have helped. But still, 4 men, and maybe even additionally 4 ladies, but 8 people total building a ship of that magnitude with rather primitive tools, harvesting that lumber, milling that lumber, getting the pitch, all that had to be done to create that boat. Years, I would think. Years. So, now, can you imagine this project just going on for years and years and years and years? And the people who would see it, I mean, it was a large structure. You'd think other people would have noticed this thing was being built, are just kind of, what are you doing? Shaking their heads in disbelief. But when he's 600 years old, the flood of water came upon the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wives and his sons' wives with him entered the ark, because the water of the flood. Of the clean animals and animals that were not clean, and birds and everything that creeps on the ground, there went into the ark to Noah by 2s, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. And of course, the old joke that the unicorns were busy that day. Maybe they missed the call. I mean, who knows? What happened to dragons and unicorns and the mythical animals, that we kind of hear about in the stories. And it came about after the 7 days that the water of the flood came upon the earth. So it looks like it took him about a week to load all the animals. A week. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, and on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened. So, let's look at that. Water's coming from 2 directions. It's coming up from the fountains of the great deep. It's coming up like geysers and so forth, as we could imagine. And it's raining. And it's raining cats and dogs at the same time. So water's coming from both directions. The rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And on the very same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wives, and the 3 wives entered the ark. They and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, all sorts of birds. So they went into the ark to Noah by twos of all flesh, in which was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, entered as God commanded him, and the Lord closed it behind him. The Lord closed the door of the ark. So that's a real, that old joke about the unicorns or the griffins or the whatever mythological beast. Why didn't they get on the ark? This was not Noah leaving people behind. God made sure that all the animals that were supposed to be on that ark got on that ark. And the doors closed when God closed it. So, this wasn't Noah forgetting some animals here. God closed that door. Noah left it open. Lord, this is your ship. This is your mission. And when you're ready, you'll send us on our way. And so, then the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. And the water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. And the water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. Covered all the mountains. All the mountains. I mean, one could imagine something like Everest covered. Hard to imagine that. And the water prevailed 15 cubits higher, and the mountains were covered. It's 15 cubits higher than the mountains. So let's just take Everest, for example. The water's 15 cubits, right? Over 20 feet, about 22 and a half feet maybe, higher than Everest, according to this story. Unbelievable. I mean, just amazing. And all flesh that moved on the earth perished, birds and cattle and beasts and every swarming thing that swarms upon the earth and all mankind. And of all that was on the dry land, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life died. And thus he blotted out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to the birds of the sky. And they were blotted out from the earth, and only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. Now, I want to back up to last week's chapter because of this early business about the Nephilim, the offspring of these spiritual beings and human mothers. And it says in verse 4 that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, meaning before the flood, what we call the antediluvian period, pre-flood, antediluvian. And then it says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. So it would seem that this practice of spiritual entities mating with human women is implied to have continued post-diluvian, after the flood. And that those demigods or giants, depending on how we kind of understand or translate that, may have come about after the flood as well. But the flood, Scripture is pretty clear, killed every living thing on the land, the birds, the insects, everything died that was on the land. Noah was left together with those that were with him in the ark. The water prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Um, I mean, that's like 5 months, you know, that they're on that ark. That's like being quarantined from COVID. Yeah, I think we can identify a little bit with the idea of Noah and his family being cooped up together for 5 months. Although at least we have television and computers and can take walks outside. Could you imagine being on that ark with all the animals? Um, Absolutely nuts. Of course, I imagine one would stay busy just cleaning stalls and feeding them. Very difficult. Um, it's clear here the destruction, but what I find compelling is this idea that they give Noah's exact age: 600 years, 2 months, 17 days. You know, in contrast to that idea that you have this anachronistic classification of animals based on what I presume are the kosher categories of clean versus unclean animals. What you see, what we see here is there's this bit of a detail that would only make sense in a literal reading of Scripture, and that is giving Noah's exact age. You know, fairy tales begin with stuff like "once upon a time," or "in a galaxy far, far away." You know, something like that. Rarely do you get such specificity from stories that are intended to merely be fables or you know, stories of morality or myth. Myths don't give out specific numerical details, generally speaking. So that's kind of a point in the favor of the literalists. But again, what's important here is the faith and morals and virtues that we can learn from this story. And I want us to imagine what it would have been like to be on that ark. You notice that the Lord only told him to build one window, and that the Lord himself closed the door, such that one would imagine that it was dark down there. It would have had to have been probably no windows just to be watertight, and you can imagine it being sloshed around quite a bit by the waves with that much water and storm on the earth. Would have been dark in there. Would have smelled probably pretty bad with all those animals. Would have been a tremendous amount of work to do. I mean, you know, all those animals have to be cared for. Their stalls have to be cleaned. They have to get fed. You have to make sure they're properly separated and cared for so that they're not eating one another. You know, how did he keep the mice? How did he keep the lions? How did he keep the elephants? So you could just imagine the incredible amount of work to be done on a daily basis, and also having to live with the same 8 people in a dark, confined space, you know, with tough conditions. Tough conditions. That's why I never joined the Navy. There's a lot of reasons I didn't join the Navy. But I think that we can identify in these last few months with how it is to be cooped up. And I think part of the reason we're seeing such civil unrest is because people have been feeling so cooped up for so very long. That's a hard thing. That's a hard thing. What I want us to remember is, I think I can identify, Noah feels, and his family undoubtedly felt, so uncertain. What is going on outside? What happened to the people that I knew, that I know? What happened to the world? As I'm seeing cities burn down, what happened to the world? Where did all this come from? And those are important questions. But what Noah, I think, had to do, and had to keep his faith, and in doing so, be an example to his family, was to trust God. God helped us build this boat. God helped us complete this monumental structure. God brought these animals to us. God put them on the boat. God closed the door. And if God has done all that, then no matter how difficult these circumstances, we have to believe that God will see us through. If we do what God told us, if we are faithful and hold up our end, then we know God will be faithful on his end. That's something that I have to remind myself in these times. We are uncertain about the future of America, and more specifically, we are uncertain about the future of the United Methodist Church. And uncertainty is always discomforting. But I hold fast to that. Look how far God has brought us as a nation and as a church. And that God has accomplished through and in America and with his people called United Methodists. And so with all of that witness, the witness of our history, we have to look forward with confidence, even in this time of arduous uncertainty, even in this difficult period of unrest and division. We have to hold on to the many, many examples in our past where God has preserved us, and know that God will continue. That if we are faithful to his calling, God will continue to use us. And he will even use this time to work on us and make us stronger and more faithful going forward. So be encouraged, church, that the difficulties that we experience now will have benefit, and that God will preserve us through these trials. And I think that Noah's and his family's example are a testament to that. Also, remember that Noah was the one who was faithful, and that the other 7, we don't know, maybe not so faithful. And for that reason, I think that's an important lesson for those of us who are Christians, especially here in urbanized area around DC. Fewer and fewer people go to church these days. Christians, we are called to be Noah. Maybe in your community, maybe even in your own family, you may be the only one who really pays attention or follows the faith of Jesus Christ. Be that example. Be that leader. Be like Noah. And remember that his family was saved because of his faithfulness. And that it may be that your faithfulness and your leadership and your example is the tangible inspiration for those close to you to be able to see the hand of God in the immediate world around them. So God may be using you in an important way, just like he used Noah, not only to save all the animals for the world, but to save his own family. Next week, we will follow this up with chapter 8 of Genesis and kind of come to a conclusion on the story of Noah. Hope you're enjoying this series. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you later.